try something again for a second that I've mentioned periodically. Any of you people who may have just stumbled in off the street trying to find a warm grate to lay on, or even you people who've been around for a while, it's pertinent for everyone, and that is, you should never, no matter that I sometimes use a kind of, shall we say, dramatic approach in humor, talking loud, the sorts of things that are not uncommon for someone just doing any sort of public speaking, as opposed to, what else would you have me do? I could stand here and do whatever I'm going to say to present it monotone, deadpan, do it in some apparent attempt to present it coldly, logically, objectively, whatever kinds of words you like in the city, but I assure you that you would be tired of that very quickly. You can almost get tired of it just hearing it described. But, in spite of me doing anything that just seems to be extremely dramatic, boisterous, everyone should periodically remind yourself and take note of this. It creeps up on you, but to remind yourself that this is not some ordinary hectoring or haranguing about the nature of life. Now, I've asked you the question several times in the past in various ways, is there any way to present anything, and I can't say anything new, but it's actually present anything because you are assuming if you showed up to a lecture on the migratory habits of the brown quail, or if you showed up and it said the secrets of particle physics, you would assume it's going to be something new, or you would not have shown up. You assume it's something new when you turn on TV, unless you're so desperate that you'll watch endless reruns, but you assume whatever it is, to some degree, is going to be new. Now, the question I have presented to you several times for your consideration, is it possible to present a new idea from me to you, and then, of course, inside, if you learn how to ask yourself this question, is it possible without it sounding as though it is some sort of a diatribe against whatever the established order was regarding that subject? Is it possible? Now, I've left that question with you on numerous occasions, but let me specifically remind you that in spite of what I do, this is not any sort of attack, sermon, even if I'm using profanity and you think I'm trying to hide any sort of spiritual or religious intent, which of course always is involved with, hectoring's not even the word, as it were, religion. Well, let's don't search for our worst synonym. Hectoring cubed, then. But this is not in any way an attack on routine life or routine man. And yet, ask yourself now, does it not, many, many times, that I'll apparently be wound up doing diagrams, doing one of my 3 or 4 famous gestures of whatever they are, and it is as though is yes, and sometimes not only do you believe you're hearing something new, that many of you will nod along, your nervous system just absolutely acts in a reflex manner that yes, oh yes, how true, how true, how true. What how true? What you're nodding about the times that I'm imitating you now is you're nodding on the basis of yes. Aren't things in a shameful state? No, things are not in a shameful state. Try to remember that. It's difficult to remember that. Of course, if it was not for words, much of this would be easier. But then again, if it were not for words, we would not be here doing it. But do recall this. After all is said and done, life itself, regardless of me here, regardless of people at a lower level, even in the city, haranguing their listeners about why you should be making more money in the stock market now that you are signed up with their program, or why you should be making more profit in real estate now that you have bought their books and will buy their new one, they're hoping. But beyond all that, life is actually pretty straightforward and simple. It's sort of like this, that everybody is talking as though they should be or are involved with this and that. Now, you all know that. But beyond that, it's this. It's pretty simple. Is you're just simply driven till you drop. That's life. That's it. And what seems to be a kind of individual existence, now I've just covered it, that's it. And it's not only somebody in the city, only somebody with a very low-octane intelligence would take that pessimistically. Of course, those kind of people take being alive pessimistically, so I'm not going to do them any damage. But it was not a pessimistic comment on my part to say you're driven till you drop. That's it. You simply find yourself here, and it seems to vary somewhat from person to person. In some cases, it seems to vary greatly, that you say and then you think that you are up to this and that. That is, that your particular life is that you're trying to overcome this or that, or that you believe that you're trying to gain this or that in life, that you believe the purpose in life is to do this or that, or the purpose should be to do this and that. Everybody's got that, no matter who you are, no matter what race, religion, what part of the planet you're from, that is going on. But get past that and think about this. You just simply find yourself here. Now forget the part I've already admitted, that everybody believes. They think and they say that they are up to or should be up to this and that. It doesn't matter what, but they're up to something. Now, forget that, because that is just fill in the blank time. The general description I'm giving you, everybody, you just simply find yourself here at the age that your intellect is working to such a degree that you begin to feel the reality of my old equation, that you begin to feel yourself as being in some way an individual with some distinct separation from the environment. All right, from now on, I have covered it for you. The matter of life is simple. You're driven till you drop. You're simply driven, then you drop. That's it. They bury you, and that's it. At this level, that is it. The only difference, the only other comment to make I made before I put it in the first part of the compounded sentence. The only other variation is, as you're driven till you drop, along the way, you say and you think a multitudes of this and that. But what I should be doing, am I making progress? Am I not making progress? Am I getting behind? Should I do it differently? Should I do it better? Who's holding me back? All that's irrelevant. You're driven till you drop. Now, that's simple, it's straightforward. The difference between this and ordinary life is something else. That was my preface for the evening. Now on to the heart of the sermon. I mean my commentary. Now on to the heart of the harangue. For you sweets lovers, I did not say meringue, I said harangue. All right, now on to tonight's show. Program, presentation, serious shit stuff. Paragraph A. I've got several tonight in mind if I don't change my mind. Or have it changed for me. The kinds of things, the first one I was going to do may sound so simple again. You've never thought about it when I say simple. It's nothing you ever thought about. But some of them, when I present the preface to the paragraph, some of you keep seeing there as I do a little imitation periodically. You're going, yeah, 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 yeah. And that was it. So watch it. Here it comes. Here it is. And it does, as a matter of fact, have a little pertinence and connection to my opening gambit here about you're driven till you drop. In fact, before I do paragraph A, let me add, in general, the this and that people think about, as I have noted before, but I might as well tie the two together before I start. The this and that is mainly on the basis of men thinking and talking about what? It starts with a P. It's not protein, it's not papayas, it's problems. That life seems to be a problem, right? That the this and that people talk about is that they want to have more money, they want to have more fame, they want to have more sex appeal to other people, they want to have a higher ranking, apparent ranking order in the death line. But the thing is, as you're driven till you drop, and you got a nervous system developed to the point that it talks, it's got to talk about something. It's going to be talking about something, And so you are talking about this and that, varying from person to person, but it all would seem, almost all, I'll give you a little room, would seem to be talking about to you what are the problems to be dealt with, to be overcome. Right? That's the way you judge the feel that I'm making some progress in life, that this is going somewhere. That little part floating, as it were, like a little piece of, a little drop of oil on this huge ocean, and the ocean is the reality of you're driven till you drop. But then this little speck of oil is like you float on there, believing that that I should be doing this and that, but it all could be lumped, almost all of it, under the category of problems. That is what life is, to overcome problems. If you're religious, it's to overcome evil and original sin. If you're psychologically inclined, it's to overcome subconscious traumas and unconscious drives that are not in your own best interest. And if you're intellectual, it's to overcome ignorance. All right, now to paragraph A. I just wanted you to have the opportunity to drag some of this even more immediately together. Now here's the part that you've never thought about it, but now listen real quick or you're going to go, yeah. Now here it is. It requires the services, it requires the participation of two parties to establish any human problem. There is no such thing as any human problem without two participants. I might even point out to you, other than the fact that I would assume that many of us would say that we find favor in the existence of sex, I could jump back and somewhat metaphorically point out that in all the creation stories, all the major ones, from the Judeo-Christian one to some others, that the gods created this one thing and then came back and thought, nah, I'll create somebody else. I could point out that the initial purpose of Eve, and this is not sexist, it could have been the other way around, any of you that want to jump on that, so it's not, don't take it as picking on women, but you could look at the initial reason for the creation of an Eve is so that there would be the necessary second person, the second party. The part I said you would miss is think about anything you consider to be a human problem, one that you have felt at the city level or that other people talk about. Guilt, fear, envy, greed, anything, psychological, spiritual. Is it possible to have any problem if it was just you? Think about it a second. How long do you have to think about it? Now, I'm aware of the fact that there are certain segments of life's body that seem to be wired up to be so-called spiritually inclined, that if I would go ahead and speak for them, if they heard something like this, and I'm sure that there are certain parts of life's body, not in the majority, but that would claim that there is this thing, conscience, that can produce guilt, and that it is inherent in all men, and blah, blah, blah. Notwithstanding that, you people should be able to hear clearly enough, at least to suspect this. If it was only you on this planet, it would not be possible to feel guilty. If it was only you on this planet, it would not be possible to be mortally afraid. I'm not talking about having a saber-toothed tiger try and jump your bones, or a dinosaur come up more like it's, without noticing, it's going to sit down right where you are. But to be mortally afraid, in the real psychological sense, the fear of being embarrassed, the fear of being ridiculed, the fear of being ignored, the fear of being put down. Is any of that possible? Could you have a psychological problem? Not just a continuing one. Could you just have one, just the experience of it, without another person? There must be two parties to establish, to sustain any human problem. Now may I refer you back to another one of my sketches and try and get you to see from a different view the absolute necessity for the partnership, for the ability for the nervous system, the bundle of the molecules in the human nervous system that apparently can speak in two voices. That is, that you can talk, and if I say something like talk to yourself, nobody even notices it. For the last 2 or 3 weeks, every now and then I've made faces and went through a little piece of stick, and some of you laughed. I don't guess you really thought why, and I didn't stop. But the idea of you talking to yourself. You remember a couple of weeks ago when I went, or whatever I did, and I did some things, one or two of you laughed, I guess maybe just my making silly faces. But the more you hang around the bushes, the more you can drag yourself away from the hold and gravity of city consciousness. The idea that seems quite valid, nobody even questions it anymore. And you don't even have to be a follower of Freud or Western psychology. They believe it in areas that's never heard of Freud. They attribute it to other things. But everybody on this planet, in whatever language, whatever terms they would use, it could be translated, and if I was talking to them, any part of this planet, and said something about talking to yourself, everybody on this planet goes, yeah. And they wouldn't hesitate. I wouldn't stop like, do you know what I mean? It's not a question. Everybody, sure, I know what you mean. But then to stop and say, wait a minute, you don't find that curious of you talking to yourself? What curious? Is it curious to be alive? Is it curious to breathe? But you don't find that droll? The idea of talking to yourself. Why did life make two of you? It's bad enough to ask people, where did you come from? Not physically. Don't tell me you came from Bellevue Hospital or Piedmont Hospital. Where did this apparent indoors you? Where did this come from? And if you just had anything resembling intelligence as defined in the dictionary, you would say, you know, that's a droll question. And of course I'd have to stop and at least compliment you on you saying it's a droll question, since that seems to be my favorite word for the week. But at any rate, that should be interesting enough. But no, wait a minute. If that's interesting enough, which nobody asked, you should be at least doubly interested to think, all right, it's not just where did you come from inside this thing, it seems to be you, and you went for a second and you went, you know, that's interesting. That's a real philosophical question, I guess, because who knows? I just suddenly was there. And you might think for a second, that's kind of interesting that you asked that. Wait, if that's interesting, find it doubly interesting that there seems to be two of you. And you don't have to be, of course, anything resembling a candidate for clinical diagnoses of schizophrenia. Everybody, psychiatrists, the popes, Freud's, everybody, you just mentioned talk to yourself. Not in some continuous passion of talking to yourself, but the thing that there is two of me in there. There are two minds, two personalities, two attitudes. Two me's are in there. Nobody finds that interesting. That you don't find it weird enough that life has produced me in such a way, me and the other people around me as far as I know, these guys in the city. And they're not only what they appear like dogs, that dogs look at each other and they can take each other at face value. Hippos can, snakes can, trees can, mountains can. But humans, they believe that indoors there's somebody else there. But then they don't think about it. There's not only, if you're going to say that there's one other person, that there's somebody indoors, and that you cannot necessarily take a human at face value. That is, you cannot physically take the language they're speaking, which we still have some of the things, not that these kind are that important, but you still have got that kind of physical communication that is not completely foreign, is not completely separate from the kind of movements that animals make. Give warning, establish territory, protect sex, etc. But humans accept the fact that beyond the common physical language of body movement, there is somebody inside that may not be communicating on that same level or as directly. Not only that, there are two of them in there. Nobody finds that interesting. Nobody even thinks about it that way. But now, back where we were, I've referred to it quite often in the last year, is the partnership. That everybody has a partnership. And of course, now it has, the way in which I am trying to get you to see it and the way in which I use it, it has no qualitative aspects to it. It's not that there is a good you and a bad you, which is what people normally accept once you point out that there are two of you, and many people of a more historic religious bent would really admit in some way that's true, even though they might not want to call it themselves. They call it me, humans, being a battlefield between good and evil. And so sometimes good works on me, and sometimes evil has the upper hand, and sometimes goodness comes back. The partnership conveys no judgment whatsoever. We simply got this partnership with Smith and Jones. They're doing business. They go by the name of Smith Jones. That's you. But there is this partnership inside. Sometimes one guy seems to be on the phone, or one woman, and other times it seems to be somebody else. And then sometimes it's like they're shouting back and forth. That Smith is up here closer, and he's saying something about, well, should I have another piece of cake? And then it's like Jones is back in the back room fooling around and hollers, don't eat more cake, you're getting fat as it is. And then Jones, it's like it jumps back just momentarily, and he thinks, well, that's sort of true, but geez, just one more. And then Jones hollers, oh, you always say that. It's not good or bad. Back at the ordinary level, it is inescapable. It is the nature of the ordinary consciousness of a binary world that there would not be two unless one was preferable. And so when you point out, if they would follow it all, that everybody seems to have at least two potential natures in them. There seems to be a kind of ambiguity in your personality. People in the city, if they would listen to this at all, and if I was foolish enough to talk about it, they're really, just as I said, they would be closer to, all right, you're talking about the forces of good and the forces of evil. And people who are less religious and more psychologically inclined would say, all right, you're talking about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The partnership, in a revolutionary view, for you to ever get anything out of this, you have got to see. Because the reality is there, not because I say so, it's not a sermon, it's not me talking you into it, that it's only at the city level that there's any feeling that there are degrees of quality in the partnership. Remember, in the real world of politics, right is might. Whoever's in charge in you at any particular time, that is what the religious person say, well, that's goodness. That's the good forces working on me. And you don't have to ask them, well, does that mean that you're a Muslim or are you a Christian? Oh, that's irrelevant. Whoever seems to be right then, Smith or Jones having the upper hand, right then Smith is the Christian. He's my good side. If it's Jones and you did decide to eat that piece of pie, then suddenly it shifted over and, no, it's Jones. That's the good side. God wants us to enjoy ourselves. Why else would he have made coconut cake? Why else? To begin to shake yourself at all from that and be able to move closer to an alternative intelligence, you have got to quite simply see that everyone feels at the old level that this partnership is weighted, that there is one of the voices at any given time is preferable, is better, more conscious, more direct, more intelligent, more proprietous, and it's none of that. They're interchangeable. Makes no difference. But you have got to have them both. That part of the purpose of having the partnership, of having, as it were, two aspects in your nervous system right up at the high end of it that both can talk, and both of them are living there in your nervous system, and they both seem to have their own agenda. Among other things, you need to see that the partnership is absolutely necessary in that a person has got to be able to talk to themselves, they've got to be able to argue with themselves, and they have got to be able to condemn themselves. Now, without that, you would not be stable, you would not be sane, you would not be civilized by the city definition. Now, I wasn't going into psychological pathology, but those apparently, and there are people around, people who apparently have no other voice in them, normally end up in dire straits in the city. They end up in the hands of the serious Philistines, not the kinds who are just artistically crude. It's the kinds that run the prisons and the funny farms who are physically crude. Because if you don't have that other voice, if you, to a certain degree, or past a certain point, that you almost seem to have a unitary running of your business, you're either generally a low-level, untreatable, I'm just using the city kinds of descriptions, criminal. The kind of person that they say, hey, we've talked to this guy, we've given him tests. You know, this is a guy we've arrested that's been holding up 7-Eleven stores, and as soon as he gets the money, he shoots the people right between the eyes. We've talked to him, and he has no remorse. None. He admits what he did, but he shows no remorse. So either that, or they're going to end up in a hospital and not down at some level judged as being simply neurotic or having suffering from schizophrenia. They're normally labeled at least criminally psychotic. All right, you've got all the way from that on a low level, but if they get in power, then they end up being a Caligula, a Mussolini, a Stalin, the kinds of people that then historically, once they're, you know, the difference between a small-time criminal and a historical figure is how many people you kill. If you only kill 4 or 5 people at a 7-Eleven store, you're considered to be a yucky little person. But if you're a Stalin, you can kill 7 million. People will still say, well, I don't like him. He shouldn't have done that. But at least if you walk past, they got a photograph of some guy that was the latest serial killer of shooting these people, of 7 people, you can go by his picture, and most people won't go, you know, yeah. But you go past Stalin, and you're not supposed to spit on his picture. You kind of, you know, you're not going to smile necessarily or anything, but you even give his picture a little room. When I talk about somebody that kills 7 people, kills 70 million people, or 7 million. At any rate, back to what I was telling you in the middle of the bell curve, the middle class, the hoi polloi, that which runs the city and life's, the heart of life's body, you have got to have the partnership in people. There's got to be the 2 voices, that each person has got to be able to have somebody inside, indoors, to talk to. And you can't literally talk to yourself, is part of what I was trying to convey in the last week or so when I had mentioned talk to yourself and make faces. There's got to be 2 of you or you can't talk to yourself. Now if you want to play with words right quick and see how life handles things, talk to yourself at first sounds like, well, there could be 1 person. Because ordinary people don't consider that they have some sort of split personality, or there are 2 of them. It's just me, I'm me. Well, can you talk to yourself? Well, yeah, everybody talks to himself a little bit. And then I want to raise my, go, wait a minute, if you're 1 person, how can you talk to yourself? Who's listening? If you're talking, all right, I'm listening. All right, if you're listening, then who's talking? See, you can't trap anybody in the binary world because every rat has 2 holes back in the city. The nervous system has to be constructed in such a way, allowing for, as I said, the exceptions of the kinds of criminals and psychopaths, as they call them, people who apparently almost have no second voice. That whatever's speaking to them, it's like just a direct voice. If I didn't make it clear enough, some of you should jump. It doesn't have to be just a killer of innocent people at a fruit stand, 7-Eleven store, Stalin. It can also be people who apparently were religious leaders. That God talks to me. Well, who else? What do you mean, who else? That's it. If God's going to talk to you, you don't need anybody else. Yeah, right. You know, the difference between him and the guy at the fruit stand, this guy at the fruit stand got a gun. This guy's got a tongue. This guy's got a tongue, and he may do you worse. At any rate, other than that, the ordinary people have got to have apparently 2 people in them, or you would not have ordinary problems. You would not be ordinary. And you have got to have 2 apparent aspects of your nervous system that can talk and listen. Because everybody has got to have somebody to talk to indoors, in here. They've got to have somebody to argue with. And I mean argue in the full sense, debate, discuss. Should I have the pie? No, I don't have the pie. Oh, let me have one more piece. No, we can't. No, we're getting too... And at least you've got to have for one other reason, that one of them can condemn the other one. And of course it can shift back and forth. You can't keep track of what's going on. It's not even important to keep track. It's that simply by having the partnership, by having two voices, you have got the minimum requirement, the minimum necessity met, that each person have somebody inside to talk to, somebody to argue with, debate with, discuss with, and somebody to condemn the other one. Some way to condemn yourself. Without that, you will not fulfill the general function out there in the middle of this purpose of being driven till you drop. You've got to have that going on. I can't resist this one. There's an old phrase that everybody has heard, and this is one of the ones that'll fit into my other possibility that I was mentioning may pop up tonight, and it's about to. It's the kind of thing that I'm going to use an example that all of you have heard and nobody's ever thought about in any particular way other than the damn thing is true. It's more than true. It's meaningful. It's insightful, which is even more than true in the city. But if you can listen, I'm going to point out to you, outside the city, still within the body of life, it is not true. It's not untrue. It's just a limited, it's a local piece of reporting that serves no purpose outside the city. But it's just such a good one, because it just seems so evident. And as I said, it's a little past a run-of-the-mill proverb. It seems that it originated from somebody that had real insight into the nature of life and finally said it. And it's been around for thousands of years I know of. And somebody said it, and all of humanity, as it were, in the city went, ah, geez, that's true. Words to live by. It's this. Why shoot the messenger bringing bad news? Everybody's heard that. It comes out in several ways. That in a pejorative sense, some historian or some commentator will point out how dumb somebody was somewhere, some court, some king, some ruler, that particular person was so dumb that he or she used to kill the messenger who brought the bad news. You know, is that not an intellectual knee slapper? You know, boy, talk about dumb. How stupid can you be that the king... Now you people just getting this, I use this revolutionary picture I have conjured up of man being a state, and sometimes apparently I'm talking about politics. It is a very, very, very specific, crude, pliable metaphor. And the reason it's pliable and the reason it's stable is because it's true out there, and then it's true somewhere else. It's true all over. And it's this. You would think that from the city level, from the ordinary view, that this ruler, this king, the guy in charge of the state, that somebody comes in with bad news, and he hears the bad news, and he just makes his whatever sign he makes or motions, and they kill the messenger. Is that not stupid? Is that not dumb? Would say the city. What? You know, that's not going to stop bad news just to kill the messenger. He just brought the news. That's not going to stop. Evident, right? I suggest you, if you belong here, follow me here for a second otherwise. To say that it's dumb, to say that it is self-defeating, to say that it is a waste of time, that it's useless to kill the messengers of bad news, are you sure? You could not see this taking place in this state. Now remember, I may not be talking about some fictitious or some real place out here. How about the state in here? But at any rate, now let's talk about the state out there. That's easier to deal with, right? How about this guy that city consciousness condemns? He finally, there he sits good autocrat, he's in charge, and somebody brings him bad news, and he makes a sign they kill him. The messenger, they just reported bad news. And let's say it happens again. Somebody brings bad news, and he goes, may I suggest to you that it will not be too long unless this state is peopled just entirely by fruitcakes and nuts. It's not going to be too long that the king will be sitting there, and he may turn around to people and he'll say, how are things going, folks? And they'll say, your grace, things could not be better. And him say, you mean there's no bad news at all? And the people go, not nary a bit. Not one iota of bad news. They'd look at each other. Bad news? Anybody heard bad news? And everybody goes, no, no bad news. Why that's unsettling funny is because it's fucking correct. But at the city they would say, well, wait a minute. I had to go back. The city, of course, couldn't follow me this far. They'd be ready to do something untoward. In the city they say, you can't just kill and do away with bad news by killing those who bring it. Really? Really? How can it be bad news if you don't know about it? Yeah, but city conscience says, wait a minute, no, you're playing with words in some way. You mean, I ask you again, what's a crime if you don't know about it? What's going on with the partnership if you never hear from Smith again? What if somebody tells you, Smith, hey, I know you, you're Smith and Jones person. You go, yeah. Did you know we've heard that Smith is an embezzler? That he's cheating you, he's taking advantage of you? I don't know anything about it. Well, I'm telling you a fact. I'm telling you that everybody that knows you is saying that that one part of you is taking advantage of you. Really? If you never count your money, how do you know somebody's stealing from you? If you never get reports of bad news, there you sit on the throne, and the only news you get is the people bring to you, or even your partner. But let's look at it a little wider in the sense that there's more than just one of you. The people. And there's a king. If nobody brings you bad news, where is the bad news? We got to turn the tape over. Just a second. Well, yeah, I would if there's any made. Just about a half. Back rolling. Well, this example fits two of the, whether you piece them together is not that important, but the criteria I said of two interesting, if not droll, aspects that I liked, that I prefaced my remarks tonight. This one fits. Both of them. That one is, it's so simple, once I twist it around a certain way verbally, the way that I have this devilish ability to mislead and trick people, at least while you sit here. Thank God when you leave here, you normally come back to your senses and you realize, that stuff's pretty good sitting there in the room and listening to it. It's some kind of entertainment, but hey, I got to do a real life out here. All right, it fits that, plus it fits. That is, it sounds so simple, and then, that can't be. It's so obvious. But it also fits that it is true and not true. That is, back at the ordinary level, the level at which all human nervous systems, except the few, what life needs from humans, the nervous system are wired up in such a way that the idea, the picturization is just beautiful, and it conveys, if I was in a city and teaching philosophy or trying to uphold some sort of city organization, I could take the thing about why kill the messenger of bad news. And I could make a whole some kind of metaphysical or political, economic, psychological school based on that. Because it's so obviously true that anybody with any intelligence in the city, you say, listen, That's a kind of psychological self-denial. It's a kind of spiritual blindness. I could call it anything. Political self-suicide. Whatever the hell that would be. I guess it would be an oxymoron sitting on top of itself. But it is true beyond any kind of discussion that it is just folly to talk about killing the messenger of bad news. It is just, it's silly. Besides wasting a life, he just brought the bad news. It's not his news. He just comes in and says, I just got news from the front over here where we're fighting the Phoenicians or whoever it is. They're about to blind us. The bad news is they're routing our best troops. And for the king to say, kill that guy, what the hell does that accomplish? That's not going to change the fact that Company C over there is being wiped out. It's just true. There's nothing else to say, right? Let's go back where I had you a few minutes ago. If you do kill the messengers, 2 or 3 of them, I suggested, I said, to a fairly sane state, pretty soon nobody's going to bring you bad news. Now you got to jump back right quick, though, because you've got this kind of intelligence. You've got the potential to last here this long, to be able to do what they can't do in the city, at least for a starting point, that you can hear 2 voices, you can listen with all ears, and you can do it simultaneously. It's not either Smith or Jones on the phone. You'll be able to do both. That what I'm saying is not an attack on city intelligence, ordinary intelligence, because it is true in the city that it's silly, waste of time, ridiculous, dumb, anything they want to call it, to shoot the messenger of bad news. They couldn't be righter, right? Except for the fact they'll never be true at the ordinary level, except for the fact of what I'm pointing out to you that most of you laughed at. You want to get technical about it. If the king kills 2 or 3 messengers that bring him bad news, I suggested most strongly, and you nodded right along, that it's going to be real short. We're talking about probably a matter of hours, assuming enough messengers come in, that we can establish in that state that the king never, as long as he lives and stays in power, never hears another piece of bad news. And some of you are getting good and can almost listen around the corner. Do I have to go ahead and ask, is it not possible that not hearing bad news might be a lot more than they would think in the city? That is, well, wait a minute, bad news is still happening, but you're just not hearing it, and someday you're going to pay the price. Yeah, you're going to drop. You're going to be driven till you drop. Oh. In other words, if you don't hear the bad news, though, wait a minute, no, if you don't hear the bad news, then the bad news could kind of pile up on you. And, really? What do you think's happening now? Yeah, but you need to hear about bad news so that you might be able to plan and maybe take some kind of remedial action. Really? Right up until now, what kind of success rate have you had taking this remedial action? Of course, none of this will work because the city consciousness wouldn't engage me in this kind of conversation this far, but if they would, and I could say, well, what kind of success rate have you had if they were that good? They'd have to go, uh-oh. Of course, then it would all fall apart, but they would be close to going, they couldn't do this, but they'd be close to their own molecules saying, God, it doesn't matter whether you know about it or not, does it? No, no, no. You can't think like that and be driven till you drop. No, you start getting out of line, you start turning around and making rude noises, and life has to keep this line kind of straight. You know, when they do those tricks with the dominoes and that first one falls, if you got just one there in the middle out of the way, it stops the whole thing. They won't all fall. And you can't depend on everybody being driven till they drop when you got too many people that are hanging around and getting out of line and doing stuff like this. It is so, I think, beautifully, if not drolefully. I think I'll finish up with droll for the year. I was trying to just use it up tonight. Intriguing and interesting, this aspect of why shoot the messenger of bad news. I will go ahead and be very crudely and just insist that you consider this internally, which is, you who've been around knew that that's what it was all about. Consider internally Forget all this other stuff out there. You know that. It's going to forget you. You might as well forget. We're talking about internally. What if you could cease? What if you had the ability and saw the utilitarianism, the potential thereof, that all reports that came out to you of bad news that you killed the messenger? What if you could internally, in your own nervous system, the chemical and electrical workings of your own little crude nervous system that would show up in an autopsy, they open you up and they don't find Smith or Jones, they find blood and guts. Of course, that's one of the other areas of one of the things that humans cannot see. No matter how scientific, no matter how precise and objective their mind, men cannot walk into an autopsy and have them cut it open, a person, humanity, and look for themselves and see what humans are. That humans are what are visible. Oh, no. No, 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 no. That which is going on in you, what if you stopped all reports? I'm talking about human bad news now, of course. I'm not talking about that you look down and your foot's on fire. Or that you open your pocket and that there's a coral snake in there. Or you walk into your bedroom and you happen to glance up on the chifforobe, if you had one, and there is a saber-toothed tiger. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what seems to be human problems. The things that you believe you're talking about, this and that you believe is the purpose of life. It's got to be. You know, there's some purpose for life. The purpose of life, in my case, is I want to get rich. I want to get rich so I can go back and piss on all the people that pissed on me. Or I want to become famous. So when I walk in the room, people go, oh. All of that to keep your nervous system occupied while you're being driven till you drop. All of those kinds of problems, what if you could stop the reports in your own nervous system from getting up to the highest point in your brain, in your intelligence, and bringing you this bad human news? Not news you need to stay alive. Not that. You know that. You people know if you're not that sane, Jesus, give me a break. It's got nothing to do with you getting the important basic information that you need to sleep, you need to eat, you need to get out of the weather. We're not talking about that. The ones that are encapsulated in what I meant of the this and that you are talking about to yourself and to others throughout your life as you're being driven till you drop. What if you stopped that from getting up here, that the messengers, you knew how to kill one or two of them, and it simply quit bringing you bad news? Just think if city consciousness could follow this at all, what would they come up with just for a split second? There would have to be something like that. What you're describing would have to produce the ultimate, probably self-imploding or exploding form of stress. Because you're saying the bad news is gone, and you're saying in some way to just steal it off from consciousness, which is not what I'm saying, but that's about what they'd have to make of it if they could hear any of it. And they would say, ooh, God, if a psychologist or a psychiatrist or even an intelligent person heard you say that, they'd probably want to put you away. That's dangerous. In the city, it sounds dangerous. It's neither here nor there. But now I'm asking you, what if you stop the reports of bad news? Boy, are you ugly. That's not me talking to you now. That's you talking to you. Boy, are you ugly. Jesus, are you less talented than you imagined for years? You thought you was going to be a writer. And sometimes now I'm saying, look at some of the stuff that you used to write. Sometimes you had me going with it. This is laughable. What if you stopped all that? Are you going out again? You're going to go to the trouble to put on some aftershave and take a shower and go try to pick up somebody in a bar? Ha! What if you stopped all of that? That nobody would bring you bad news at the human level, the mortal level. That'd be a waste of time, you say, in the city. Useless, self-defeating. Really? That the king looks out on all the people. The king. Now remember the king. We're not talking about some guy on a street corner. We're talking about the king. Of course, to do this, there's got to be somebody ruling you. The king says, people, is there any bad news? And the people say, your grace, things couldn't be better. No bad news in sight. No reports of bad news. No suspicions of bad news. Because they know what will happen. I'm sure most of you followed, if you were listening, that from a city view, taking all this and the kind of terms they would use, they could look upon that as being, at the very least, detrimental to one's health. Because all of you know that they encourage you that, as they call it emotionally, that you have got to express yourself and let things out, that you'll explode and you'll get ulcers. But what if the king had no reason to get ulcers? Let me put it to you another way. Now, we're not talking about the city now at all. I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about out in the bushes. What's the use in being king if you don't get special privileges? And if you need any help, all right, I take back my preface there. All right, now think about it in the external world. Think about it out there then. What's the use in being king? Who in the hell would want to go through all that? Now, right quick, you might think, if you didn't give it any analyzation, you might think, well, boy, I'd love to be a king somewhere, or a queen, because everybody got a bow and scrape and all that. But what if this? What if they suddenly said, you're king, and you got there, but you find out that you didn't have any more privileges than anybody else? I assure you, you would last less than a day. Probably before noon, you'd think, stuff this. What's the sense in being king unless you get special privileges? All right? What's the point in trying to be you? What's the point in trying to do this unless there is something special, some privilege, something regained from this? What I'm suggesting to you tonight, the great privilege is for nobody to bring you any bad news. Because if they do, to what avail? What use is made of it? And only those in the city will say, well, all sorts of good use, because then I can plan. I can make new plans for tomorrow. I can think about things. Only somebody in the city would say that. Because only somebody in the city will talk about this and that being the purpose of life when the purpose is to be driven till you drop. No, there's got to be a purpose. And I think I know what my purpose is. Your main purpose is to deliver and accept bad news. How about something else on problems? This still qualifies. This is so slippery. Oh, well, doesn't matter. I'm going to do it anyway, aren't I? Probably. Who asked you? No. Can you see that all human problems, all problems, are a matter of timing? That if you took anything that apparently is a problem and you shifted the time, it will cease to be a problem. Let me give you, not all of you are reacting. I'll give you what would seem to be the supreme example, a fatal illness. A fatal illness. There's enough fatal illness for everybody to go around. So there's no waiting, so don't worry, you won't be shortchanged. A fatal illness. Just think of whichever one that strikes your fancy or otherwise. All right, whatever this fatal illness is, let's say that you have a distinct possibility, since it's very common, for you to get this fatal illness. All right, if we can put off this fatal illness, and it's going to, let's say that very likely going to hit you, this fatal illness, if we can shift the time 100 years from now, what does it mean to you? Am I right? You don't hear that, you'll be dead. The fatal illness comes looking for you, this particular one that you thought about, a brain tumor. Right. Cancer of the MasterCard. Whatever strikes you as being some terrible way in which to go, all we got to do is change the time element. In this case, I said 100 years because that's safe enough. It is no longer a problem. I didn't do that just to be funny. I was trying to get you to see an extreme, that it is a literal fact. But everything else, everything that you call a problem, anything can be a problem that may pop up tonight. It may be a problem, something in your life, and somebody told you if this problem happens, they'll be calling you between 11:30 and 12. They're going to have to call collect because they're going to be in a hurry and they may not have money. But if you get that call, it's going to be bad news. You even know what the bad news is. What if you don't get the call? I would have to explain all of life. I'd have to sketch all of life verbally to carry this a lot further. But even if it is something that if you got the call tonight, not just between 11:30 and 12, some even unspecified time, but right now, your feeling would be, if I question you, that, well, this is a problem. If this happens, to me it's going to be a problem whether it happens tonight or tomorrow. What if it happens 2 days? Well, say, I can't do it because you would say, if you're ordinary, you'd say it would still be a problem. If I say, all right, what if we could put it off 48 hours? You'd say, well, it's still a problem. What if we put it off 4 days? It'd still be a problem. But now you people should be able to hear this fast enough that that is not true. That is simply not true, and it cannot be explained. There's no way to try to verbally prove it. You have to have that much knowledge about the workings of the human nervous system and life itself, that things that are a problem right now, tonight, you're not sure when, but right now, if such and such happened, if you heard that such and such was going to happen, that's a problem. I mean, it's a problem. It would hurt me. I could be devastated. It's a problem. If it doesn't happen now, and it happens X amount of time later, it is no longer that problem. It is very likely no longer, it is not a problem in the sense that it is now when you say it is. If it happens now, whatever you take to be now. I told you it was real slick or real sticky. Anything that is a problem within a context to you. Remember, ordinary people, I've tried to point out to you, and some of you have seen this, ordinary people take time as being something external to themselves. Ordinary consciousness. But if you place, and you can see this yourself, you've got to be able to see it yourself, that a problem fits into this time frame. Whether once you think about it, yeah, all right, if this happened, it would be a problem to me. If it happens later, who knows how much later? Don't sit there and argue with me that if I say, all right, if it happened tomorrow, would it still be a problem? You say, well, hell yeah, it would. Because I'm talking about something that really hurt me, it'd still be a problem. What if it happened 10 years from now? Well, who knows? I might be a different person. What I was worried about, what I was thinking about was, I've got a close relative that's sick. And what if they died tonight? It'd hurt me. And you're saying, what if they held on 2 or 3 more days? It'd still hurt me. What if they held on another 10 years and didn't die? If you were just a frip, if you just had reasonable intelligence, you would have to admit, well, 10 years, we could get in an argument by then. They could cheat me out of money. They could run over my foot in their old pickup truck. All right, you're right, I guess, for the sake of argument, that 10 years from now, when they die, assuming they die 10 years from now, I might not think of it as the problem that I do right now. Of course, in the city, that doesn't really prove anything. But back to what I presented to you, that every problem is a matter of timing, no matter what it seems. Hunger. You're only hungry when you're hungry. If you look at it as a problem, I'm starving. I've been here on this desert island, on this raft after the capsizing of the boat. And the problem is now I'm starving. But you're starving right then. All you got to do is shift. If we could take you out of time, and now let's say that it's X amount of hours, days later, and you're back home after having been rescued. And you spent the last 3 days at a Baskin-Robbins. Hunger is not the problem. And you can say, all right, it's because I'm now full. It's timing. There is no problem without the time element. If you do not have the thing you call a problem at the right time, the same thing can happen. The same thing that if you were standing outside of it and observe that the same conditions happen, is this a problem to you? And you go, no. Now you can start making them up to where you go, well, contraire. I'm in favor of it. It served the bastard right after what he did to me. It's a matter of timing. There is a way in which, since I started this, that internally you can shift time with evidently the partnership, messengers bringing you the bad news of problems. Because the real time, or an alternative time, the city time is real enough out there, the kind that seems to be a time external to you that's running, that nobody can stop. It's just a flow of events. Of course, you've got to be city conscious and feel like that there is a world out there that operates in some way, its own speed, its own tempo, with its own purpose, if any, and then there's me having to deal with this. So at that level, the sense of time, you can have an effect on it because it seems to run independent, they say objectively speaking, independent of man. There's no such thing. And if you can get in touch with the other time, it's there. It's no great mystical feat, it's simply there. You can shift the time internally. And to use the kind of description I was trying to use thus far, it's almost like this, that they want to deliver the problem. And all you got to do is shift it some way. Just refuse to accept delivery right now. That's all that's necessary. Tell them to come back later. It doesn't matter how much later. Don't even fool with that. Just say later, if you can just stall it. Maybe they just wait 5 minutes and they come back and say now. Say no, no, no. I mean, if you really push, say, all right, 10 hours from now, come back tomorrow. Because it's always safe to say, come back tomorrow. Come back earlier tomorrow. Or don't come in so early tomorrow. Later tomorrow afternoon, and I'll accept delivery. Now, I'll take the bad news, I'll take the problem in, because obviously, you can play it this way, that I can't escape from it. You know where I live, and you say the problem's there, so, but not right now. You've got to be able to shift it that much internally if you've got any control over your own intelligence. You can do that. It's not a matter of I don't ever receive the problem. I don't ever hear about it again. That's being able to actually kill the messenger. And I'm trying to give you an easier way to sort of ease up on it. It's all you got to do is stop them, refuse to accept delivery just now. That's all that's necessary. Is to be able to shift your intelligence, your conception of time. You're not saying, I will never accept this problem. You can't force it on me. I'm not going to listen to that bad news. If you're good enough to do that, you don't even need to be saying, hear me talk about it. And so you can't start off necessarily doing it that way, but you say, wait a minute, come back in a little bit. Not right now. That's all you got to do is be able to shift it to not accept your awareness, to not accept the delivery of the bad news just now. And they start, ring the doorbell in here. As soon as you peek out, you see it's a guy perhaps with a black arm brand. It's a guy from Western Union. Back for you people that's too young to know Western Union, normally you could assume back in the 30s and 40s that it's 99% chance. The 1% chance is you won a contest somewhere maybe. The other 99% chance was people didn't want to see Western Union people showing up. So you peek out the door and there's the delivery. All you got to do is say, just send word, say, not right now. And they say, well, I got to deliver this sooner or later. Well, just not now. Just come back in a little bit. It's 5 hours? Yeah, 5 hours. Come back. Or, can I come back tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow. Same time? No, a little later. Same time? Well, no, a little earlier. But can I come back tomorrow? Sure. Well, how about later this afternoon from the neighborhood? Right. Just not now. You don't have to tell them why. It's not their business. Why? Just any time but now. Just not now. No, not now. It's being able to internally shift time. And once you can shift time, you have taken anything that seems to be a problem, and you have taken the underpinnings out from under it. And once you can do it, once you see it, you'll know why I started this particular section of saying that every problem is a matter of timing. Because no matter what it is, including a fatal disease, a horrible accident, a head-on collision that's going to kill you and everybody in the car, if I said in some way, that is your destiny. And you said, fine, but is there any way, can you do anything? I said, all right, it's your destiny, but it's not going to happen until 100 years from now. If I could do that, and if I were you, and If you had the same attitude that I think I would have about a head-on collision, I'd think, well, all right, I can live with that. All right? Deliver me that wreck 100 years from now. If that's it, okay, I'll take it. But hell, by then you've already weaseled out. You slipped up and died anyway. I think I'll stop. Into the public tape, and you people in the group stick around for a second. For you people in the public, bye-bye. And be careful being part of the public. You know where that can lead. You people, California, New York, Florida, Oregon, Washington, Montana, points east and west. Been so long since I've been to some of these places, and I don't having occasion to correspond with all of you and all of the groups getting the tapes necessarily. I just wanted to say hi. I'm still aware of who's there. I still get reports. You people are still important enough that here we stand doing these tapings, that all of this would not be going on with the tapings. And me with a shirt on, and a podium, and lights, and all of that, were it not for you people. So I can take it very seriously, your continued existence out there. And don't forget, it was not for the public, of course, but I did give you my pre-holiday gift and my post-holiday gift that you should really ponder, consider, chew, neuralize, think upon, wrestle with, fall into the bushes and roll around with the fact of a new kind of intelligence, a different and alternative way to do intelligence is to be able to think without believing. Take all possible holidays that you might ever want to celebrate and consider that was my gift. The great thing is it's non-returnable. So if you might as well go ahead and use it because there's nowhere to take it back to, right? Come see us if you can, and I'll promise again, since it doesn't cost me anything much, that I'll try to get out, I'll try to get up, I'll try to get down there soon. It's a good thing I don't have any particular routine shame, isn't it? Oh well, never mind. Bye.